Hello, everybody, and welcome to CELPIP General Overview. This is Brandy speaking, and I will be your presenter today. I'll remind you all here that your microphones will be muted throughout the session, so kindly use the chat box area in Zoom if you do have questions about the CELPIP test today, and either I will answer them as I'm able to, as I'm presenting, or I've got a colleague online with me today named Simon, and he can also type with you in the Zoom chat area if again, I can't get to your question right away. So I presume you can hear me okay. Nobody has stated otherwise in the Zoom chat, so that's great. I'm glad the microphone is working smoothly. If there are any tech issues today, kindly let us know about them right away, right in that Zoom chat. Of course, if it's something with my own system, I'll fix it if I'm able. But if it's your particular setup at home that's causing the issue, the best advice I'll give you right now is just to log out of Zoom and log right back in again. And that should reset the system and hopefully keep you engaged throughout the session. Now, you're welcome to take notes today if you wish. I think as long as you follow along and participate in that Zoom chat box area, that will certainly help you engage with the material and learn more about the CELPIP test. We ask you also to keep an eye on your email inbox because shortly after the session finishes today, we will be sending you an email that's going to contain a wealth of material that will help you continue to study at home. So keep an eye for a link that will open a study pack of materials. And within that study pack, you'll receive also several other links that will take you to different parts of the CELPIP website. There's a survey if you want to give feedback. There's a link that will open up our previously recorded version of this webinar and so on. So again, do keep an eye there and catch up on anything you might have missed by opening up that study pack of materials. So here I am. My name is Brandy, and I am an online instructor for the CELPIP test. I have been helping people prepare for CELPIP for over 6 years now, and I really enjoy what I do. I hope all of you are here today with questions and ready to do a little bit of work to get you acquainted with this test as well. Now, I'm going to present to you what we call a path to success. I think each of us have our own timeline in mind about when we might be taking the CELPIP test. So we are here on that very first step along this path where we are taking this exact webinar, the CELPIP General Overview. It is an introduction to the test, and today we are going to be answering some practice test questions from all 4 language components. So you'll have a much better understanding about what to expect after you've taken today's webinar. There are 8 other Zoom webinars that are all free to access, and you can sign up for those as well on the CELPIP website, which we encourage you to do. Because by the time you're finished taking all 9 of our free 2-hour webinars, you'll have a very strong foundation from which you can continue to build your own study routine, which is when we recommend that you move on to step 2 here, which is taking the sample tests. There are 2 free practice tests right on the CELPIP website. So it's really important for each of you to take a test. I would encourage from beginning to end without breaks, as that is exactly what you'll be doing on the real test. So you might as well get used to that format now. When you've completed all the free study practices and all the free prep materials we offer, there are additional materials you could purchase in our online bookstore. And I will get into that a little bit more at the end of today's session if you're interested in hearing about that. And once you've done whatever prep you need to do to make yourself feeling confident and ready to take CELPIP, we advise that you book your test and get into the testing room to complete it and see how well you will score. All right, so here's today's structure. Here's what we're going to do together as a group. I will start off by introducing the basics about what CELPIP's all about and why we would take it. We'll make this little introduction part fairly brief. We'll spend most of our time today on test information. And this is where we will examine your listening, reading, writing, and speaking skills. After we've done that, we will spend the last half hour of our time together looking at actual test taker answers in both the writing and the speaking sections of CELPIP. So I'll present to you real CELPIP test questions that other test takers encountered at some point in the past. And as a group, when we review the answers that were submitted on these tests, we're going to try to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of each response. And we've selected these responses to cover quite a wide variety of levels as well. So by the time we're finished today, I really hope everyone has a pretty solid understanding about how you're going to achieve your best score when you take CELPIP. And as I said just earlier, I'll take the last 2 or 3 minutes to quickly run over other free prep materials we offer and then introduce you to the online bookstore. So let's get started with the basics. CELPIP, as you know, is the name of the test, of course, that you're preparing for now. The official title of this test is quite a long one, as you can see. It's technically called the Comprehensive English Language Proficiency Index Program. So the word CELPIP is actually an acronym. And when we say CELPIP, we just mean the test that you will be taking. When you take CELPIP, you absolutely must take it in a testing room. You cannot take this test from your home computer. So you'll book your session, you'll choose your location and your time and so on. You will be probably assessing all 4 language elements depending on the test you book. So listening, reading, writing, and speaking will be assessed on the CELPIP General Test. This test is going to focus on your functional language proficiency. And as you answer questions, especially in, say, writing and speaking, I think it's important to just think about how you communicate day to day. Use experiences from your own life in the community, at school, at work, and draw in these experiences to help you develop your answers and make them more interesting. If you're interested to note, the CELPIP test got its start in Vancouver in British Columbia. Many moons ago now, that's where it was initially created, and it's spread out globally to be taken around the world at present date. And it is currently administered by Prometric. That's the name of the company that delivers this test to you. Now, you can take CELPIP, of course, to have your language proficiency assessed by the Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. So as a matter of fact, let's talk about why you might be taking CELPIP. And I'd also like you to tell me in the Zoom chat, perhaps, why you are going to be taking this test. So on the left-hand side of this screen, you can see the CELPIP General Test. This is by far the more common of the two. If you are applying for permanent residency status in Canada, you would want to take this test. It's the one that will assess listening, reading, writing, and speaking. You can also take the CELPIP General if you need to prove your language proficiency for a professional designation. You can also take the general test for your applications for the postgraduate work permit program. And because you will be assessing all 4 language components, this entire test will take, at the very most, 2 hours and 50 minutes to complete. A lot of test takers will finish ahead of that time. You do have the choice to move yourself comfortably through this test if you finish a bit early. But no, at the very, very most, the longest it would be 2 hours and 50 minutes. The price of this test is also listed for you in Canadian currency. So that would be 295 Canadian dollars plus tax at present day. All right, now, if you were going to take CELPIP for your Canadian citizenship, you would only need to register for the CELPIP General LS test. This one is the one on the right-hand side of your screen. And LS just stands for listening and speaking. So those are the only 2 language components that you would be assessing. And as such, the test is much shorter, as you can see, at the very most 70 minutes. And it's also less expensive. So 199 Canadian dollars plus tax to register. Why are all of you preparing for CELPIP? Let me know, please, in the Zoom chat area. Are you applying for PR status in Canada? Are you pursuing your PGWP? So go ahead and let me know there in the Zoom chat if you would. And while you're doing that, I will also announce that you can take the CELPIP test also now for Australian immigration and visa purposes. So it's the same test, whether you take it for Canadian immigration or Australian immigration. So it's nice to know that you've got a little bit of choice there as well. Okay, let's get into why anybody might take CELPIP. As you know, you have options. So why CELPIP? Well, first of all, since CELPIP has spread globally, you've got quite a few test center locations that you could select from. There are more than 200 test centers that currently exist around the globe, and there are always more opening as we're able to work with local partners. When you enter whichever test center you've booked for, you can expect to be seated in one room. Think of it sort of like a classroom if you wish. You can expect anywhere from, say, 10 to about 30 other people in the same room at the same time. It all depends on how many people have booked your particular location and time. So regardless of how many people are there, you can expect that there will be candidates seated on either side of you, exactly like you see here. This is a picture of one of our Vancouver testing centers. There will be a little keyboard, a monitor, a mouse, and so on, your own little workstation in front of you. And I want you to note, please, the headset with the microphone attached that each of you will be wearing throughout the entire CELPIP test. Of course, the headset is going to help you finish your listening test, but there are also instructions read out loud to you periodically throughout the entire test, so it's wise to keep those on your ears. The headsets will also help as a noise cancellation device, because when you get to the speaking section, you'll simply speak out loud and answer your questions right there in front of your computer, and you'll be recording your answers into the microphones that you see attached to the headset. All right, so there will be a little bit of background noise in the testing room when you're taking your test. It's not going to be quiet as a pin. So keeping those headsets on your ears will also help to block out a little bit of background noise should several people all be completing their speaking test at the same time. So it's nice to know what to expect. You also can see those little privacy shields or walls or dividers that will help separate you as well from the neighbors on either side of you. So it keeps everybody nice and focused on the test at hand. All right, now once you've registered for your test, so imagine you have to create your online CELPIP account. That's your first step. And you would go in and select your location and your test sitting and time. You would pay your registration fees. So once you've booked your test, if life happens, maybe you get sick or a big emergency arises, and you realize that you're not going to be able to take the CELPIP test on the date that you've booked, as long as it is at least 7 days before your scheduled test, you get one free test transfer to another date. You would simply log into your CELPIP account and use the self-serve options there to choose a different date. Again, it has to be done at least 7 days before the scheduled test date, and it's up to you to register yourself for a different date. You get one freebie, we'll call that. If you do need to change the date of your test, additionally, on that same test registration, any additional transfers will cost a $50 admin fee. So it's really helpful to lock down a date and plan to stick with it if at all possible, of course. Now, I mentioned earlier about the time. On most screens on CELPIP, you are going to see a next button in the top right-hand corner. It is in a blue rectangular area, as you can see up top. I've circled it for you on this example. So if you do happen to finish questions early and there's still time left on the clock, you don't have to just sit there and wait for the time to count backwards. Once that clock does get to 0, the test will move you forward automatically. But as I said, if you're finished and you've double-checked your work, you're confident with your answers, you might as well click that next button and move yourself forward rather than wait. So as I said, you have a little bit of flexibility as far as when you want to, or how fast, I guess, you'll work through the test questions. So this is why we say at the very most, if you never use that next button, it would take about 2 hours and 50 minutes for the entire test to be completed. But many people would finish earlier, depending on how quickly they choose to work through that test. So that's nice to note. Your score reports also are going to be available very quickly, within 3 to 4 business days. So you will be notified to log into your account and check your report there, and you'll see exactly what score you earned. And speaking of scores, here they are. So I want you all to think about the reason why you might be taking CELPIP. Hopefully you've done a little bit of research yourself and you have an understanding about which goal score you are pursuing. Go ahead and let me know in the Zoom chat, which score are you aiming for? And that will help me as your instructor today make sure that we all understand the skills that we need to earn that score. So while you're doing that, I'll point out that level 12, as you can see, is the very top score that anybody might achieve on the CELPIP test in any one language element. And that would indicate very expert proficiency. You'll notice too that the CELPIP levels we've listed for you down the left of this chart match exactly the CLB levels on the right. So CLB stands for Canadian Language Benchmark. And if you already know what your CLB level is, you should have a fairly decent understanding about what your CELPIP level would be should you take the test today, right? Because they're very closely matched. So let's just wrap up why we would take CELPIP as a computer-delivered test. Because you're completing your speaking sections right in the testing room, there's only one sitting. It is a fairly long test, yes, but then you're finished, in and out. You do not have to book a separate interview with a live examiner that's going to ask you questions and gauge your speaking ability. And that tends to put a lot of people at ease. They're a little more confident and comfortable working through those questions in the testing room. Your reading questions are going to provide your text and also your questions and answers on the same screen. So that helps you navigate back and forth and find the information you need to answer efficiently. Your writing test will have a word counter, a spell check feature, and also some editing tools. So that's nice to note. The listening headset will have a volume control button, so please make yourselves comfortable during this test. And last but not least, there will be timers on just about every computer screen where you're working through questions. So do keep an eye on the time. Please make sure you have finished answering all questions before that time gets to 0, because once the time is up, the computer will move you forward, finished or not. And you don't want to leave any blank questions on the test, because then there's no opportunity to earn any points at that moment. All right, so I'm going to dive right into the test information. We'll start with listening, because listening is the very first language element that you will complete when you take the official CELPIP test. Listening has 6 different conversations or parts that you will complete. So the fastest anybody might work through these parts would be 46 minutes total for all 6. Depending on the length of time you take on each question, and also on the particular test you complete when you're in the testing room. The longest you might be spending on the listening test would be 55 minutes. So again, there's always going to be a bit of a range. It's really important to note that the questions you answer are going to come after the audio has finished playing. So this is why using paper and pen that is provided to you right in the testing room, we strongly recommend that you take notes. As you're listening, if you can capture those key points, you'll have the notes right in front of you as you answer the questions later. So you're not being tested on your memory, you're being tested on your language comprehension skills. Again, there will be timers on every screen, and the passages and the questions themselves will become a little bit more challenging as this test moves forward. So that's important to note. Part 1 will feel the easiest to you. You'll likely understand the meanings of more of the vocabulary there. By the time you get to part 6, which is the last part of the listening test, this is advanced level. So the vocab will certainly be noticeably higher level, as well as the types of questions too that you're answering. So it's really important to take advantage of these free webinars that we're doing together, and also the free practice test, to get a sense about how that might feel. So before I actually play for you a listening practice, we are going to complete one in just a moment here. I wanted to mention briefly that of the 6 listening parts, there are sort of 2 structures or formats insofar as how the questions are going to be delivered to you. So think of it as 2 halves to the same test. Parts 1 to 3 in listening are going to look like what you see here on the left-hand side of the screen. You'll listen to your audio or conversation. You'll be taking notes, I hope. And then when the questions arrive after the audio has finished, you're going to hear them read out loud to you one at a time. You will have 30 seconds to select one of the 4 multiple choice answers that is facing you on screen. So 30 seconds for each and every question. That's going to happen all the way through to the end of part 3. By the time you begin the second part of your listening test, so parts 4 to 6, you'll notice if you look now to the right of the screen, the format has changed. You're still going to listen to the audio. You'll hear it just once. You'll hopefully take your notes as you're listening. But then when the questions appear, you're going to have all questions on one computer screen. And it's now up to you to read the questions yourselves. And again, select one answer of the 4 from the multiple choice selections there. So you are being tested to listen and answer and read and answer and so on, based on that conversations that you'll be listening to. So as far as these 6 parts go, the conversations between 2 or even 3 people will occur in 4 of the 6 parts. All right. And the other 2, of course, would have single speakers talking to you. When you have 2 people speaking, you're going to have a man and a woman's voice. So it will be really easy to tell the difference between them, because you won't always have a picture of who's who. The practice we're going to do together today has been taken from a listening part 1. So that's why you're seeing a picture here behind my questions on screen. Remember, listening part 1 is the easiest part of your CELPIP listening. And as such, you'll have a little bit more information as far as who it is you're going to be listening to. So when we take notes, and we're going to do this right now, I hope you've got a paper and pen handy so you can practice with us today. When you're taking notes, it's really important to try to keep the notes as short and organized as you can, because you only hear the dialogue once. So we need to really focus in on the key words. And I always talk about the 5 W's. If you can catch who, what, where, when, and why of any situation, you're going to have all the necessary details that will help you answer questions effectively as soon as the audio has finished. So I've got 5 questions on screen, as you can see. The first 2 are crucial, right? As these 2 people start talking to each other, we want to know who they are. If they introduce their names, please write them down in your notes so you'll remember that. If they introduce their job title, also keep that in mind. Those are the who details, and the who is really important. The third question down says what. What are they talking about? So in very general terms, right near the introduction to any conversation, usually the people will give you a heads up as to what it is they'll be talking about. So looking at the picture of these 2 people, it appears to me that they're probably at work. I noticed some business clothing that they're both wearing, and I noticed the filing cabinets and folders and such in the back. So we want to really start thinking about what could this topic of conversation really be about? Something work related, it would appear. So capture that right away as soon as you know. And once you've got those who and what type details, you then want to really focus in on the specific details too. There might be a problem, and if so, note it down. How does each person feel about it? Is there a solution? And so on. So I'm going to play the audio clip for you now. It's only about a minute or so long, maybe a little bit longer than a minute. And after you've heard it, and I hope you take notes as you're listening, we're going to quickly take up the questions here that I've got on screen. And then using your notes, you're going to answer a real CELPIP test question as well. So let's listen into the audio and we will see how well your note-taking goes. Here we go.
Hello, Ms. Jeffers. I'm Matthew, your temp from the agency.
Yes, hello, Matthew. This way, please. I have you set up here. I'm afraid your task isn't very challenging, but it's just for one day. Please have a seat.
Thank you. What am I to do?
These boxes on your left contain envelopes. The boxes in the middle contain letters. I'd like you to put one letter into each envelope. Make sure you fold the letter like this, so the address shows in the window of the envelope. Then put it in this empty box on your right.
Would you like me to seal the envelopes as well? If you have a sponge and a little dish of water or one of those dabber things?
No. Fortunately, we have a machine that will do that.
Okay. Is that all? I don't need to answer any phones?
No, your task is simple. I'm sure you'll be quite sick of it shortly. I apologize in advance for that.
Okay, that's the end of that. So before we actually answer a CELPIP test question, let's really quickly double check that we can at least answer the top 3 questions here on screen as all of the info is revealed. So I'd like to know who these 2 speakers are, please. Can we start with the man? What is his name? His name's the easiest, and that's why I'm asking you first. So this is one of those details that you definitely wanted to be listening for. It's the who. So let me know, what is the man's name? Yes, you have it. His name is Matthew. Yeah, that's a fairly classic Canadian name. Doesn't have to be a Canadian name, but it just happens to be one in this case. The woman's name, on the other hand, might have been a little bit more difficult for you to catch. All right, so her name, in case you missed it, is Ms. Jeffers. Ms. Jeffers. All right, so Ms. Jeffers is a very formal title, isn't it? We don't have her first name. It's just Ms., a title word for a woman, as well as Jeffers being the last name. So right away, just from their names being Matthew, a first name, which is casual, and Ms. Jeffers being a formal title, right away, it starts to give you the impression about the relationship between these 2. They don't seem to know each other, but Ms. Jeffers is clearly providing Matthew with his job responsibilities and tasks for the day. So that is the topic of conversation. Matthew is new to this office, and we're told he's only there for one day, as a matter of fact. And Ms. Jeffers is running down all the specific tasks that he'll be completing. And I won't get into the specific tasks with you right here, We would actually return to this in our listening webinar and answer more questions in detail. But I think for our practice today, that's probably sufficient. We didn't get to a problem or a solution yet. We'd have to continue listening to this dialogue, and we won't do that for time today. But we know who and we know what. So let's try this question out. So remember, this is what your screen would look like for parts 1 to 3 listening. Notice the time in the top right corner. Right now it shows 25 seconds. You see that in red print. On the actual test, you'll start with 30 seconds, and that timer is going to count backwards. You must make a selection. You can see that this is question 1 of 8. You must select one of those 4 answers with your mouse. Just click inside the bubble. Do that before time is up. And again, there's a next button on screen. So if you answer early and there's still time left and you're happy with your answer, just click next and you'll move yourself over to question 2. I will advise you there's no back button. You could never return back. You also do not get to carry with you the extra time to the next part, but it's nice to know you do have that control over your speed. So I'm going to play this question out loud for you. Notice on the left of this computer screen, you can see the word playing, and right beneath that is a blue bar. So when you see the word playing, that's a clue to you that you should be hearing the audio through your headset. And the blue bar is actually a timer. It would take about 3 or 4 seconds at the most for the question to be read out loud to us. So that little blue bar on the official test would zip quickly over to the right-hand side. And the moment that question's finished is when you can start selecting your answer. So I'll play this for you now, and feel free to answer the question for me in the Zoom chat when you're ready. Here we go.
Question 1.
Which word best describes the man's task?
Okay, I'm going to count you down 30 seconds, just so you know what it feels like. Go ahead and let me know. What is the answer to this question? I've got a couple of quick guesses coming in. You've got about 7 seconds more now, and that would be the full 30 seconds, just so we know what that feels like. Okay, right about there. 30 seconds is up. So on the official test, I'm hoping you would have clicked an answer by now, because if you didn't, the computer would move you forward to question 2 automatically. If you don't answer, if you leave it blank, there's no opportunity for a point. If you don't know the answer, I want you to guess. You wouldn't lose a mark if you got it wrong, but if you guess and you guess correctly, well, you get a point towards your score. So it's better to guess than to leave it blank is the takeaway here. Now, it looks like in the Zoom chat box that everybody unanimously has indeed said boring. And that is indeed the right answer. Okay, so we know that Ms. Jeffers apologizes to Matthew and suggests that he's going to be sick of this job shortly, and it's not very challenging. Matthew himself keeps asking questions about what else he might do aside from working with letters and envelopes and boxes. So we've got lots of evidence from this question to suggest that this job is probably going to be boring. So congratulations on answering the question correctly, first off, but note as well, this is an inference question. This answer was not provided directly through the dialogue. You had to come up with that answer based on those clues we just talked about. So inference skills are actually the most advanced type of question there is. So I'm pleased to see that everybody that did guess in the Zoom chat did get it right. Okay, let's move on now to we won't do any more listening of passages, as we do have a 2-hour listening webinar that you can easily come back and take. But I wanted to point out to you that your listening part 5 has a video. It's the only part of the entire CELPIP listening test that does have a video. I'm showing you a screenshot of the 3 people that you would hear if you took the webinar and took that practice test. This is part 5 of 6, remember. So it's going to be fairly intermediate, approaching advanced. There will be some higher level vocabulary and concepts to understand. If you cannot understand the meaning of all of the words, we definitely want you to keep an eye on the facial expressions, keep an eye on the body language, look at the setting behind the people. All right, there's lots and lots of information that you can glean just from watching people talk. And sometimes those visual clues that we're talking about helps you to fill in the gaps of comprehension when you do not understand the vocabulary. All right, so you can tell when somebody's angry sometimes just by looking at their face or listening to the tone of voice. You know, look at the clothing these people are wearing. Looks like a business casual setting, so they're probably having a meeting. So again, don't be afraid to use visual clues as well as those auditory clues when you're listening. I think those two skills definitely go hand in hand. Okay, let's get into the types of listening passages too. We've already looked at conversations. Remember, there are two passages in listening, parts 4 and 6. They're both fairly intermediate to advanced. You're going to have one single speaker talking to you. And given the level of challenge and some of those high-level vocab words, once again, there are other ways sometimes to understand the overall meaning apart from just focusing on the vocab. So up top, I've got these, again, auditory clues. If you've ever noticed when someone's speaking aloud, or if you're watching the news on an online app or such, usually when there's the next idea to be added, the speaker will pause, just like I did there. And when you can understand that there's a slight pause, it trains your ear to recognize that the next important idea will be arriving. So you're ready to write it down. Listen too for intonation. Sometimes when we ask yes/no questions, our voice will go up. If we're not sure about something, the voice also will go up or rise. When we're finished with a point, the intonation will fall, exactly as I demonstrated. And you'll note too that these key words I've mentioned a few times now, the who, what, where, when, and why, those key words, because they're important, are generally stressed, like I just did with the word stressed. If you notice a word that's a little bit louder and maybe a little bit longer as it's being pronounced, that's probably an important word that you'll want to write down in your notes. Okay, so those are auditory, things that you listen for. At the bottom of this screen, I've listed as well some concepts that you'll really want to think about, especially as you study for your listening part 6. This is advanced level. Part 6 in particular is going to give you a main topic, and then it's going to introduce you to several different experts. And your job is to understand who these people are, what their opinion is, and why they believe as they do. So it's important to listen for their names. It's important to listen for language that signify it's an opinion that relates only to that individual. So for example, if you were to hear something like, the teacher believes that her students will do well on the test. The words believes that tell you this is the teacher's opinion, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody you encounter in that article or that passage would have the same opinion. So again, there's lots you can do with language beyond just vocabulary development. Vocab's important, yes, but always look for as many clues as you can, whether you're watching the video, you're listening for the voice, and you're focusing on these key concepts. I think that will help you quite a bit as you prepare. All right, and last but not least, let's talk about note-taking. I'm going to throw a whole pile of tips up here. If any of you have tips you'd like to add, that would be wonderful. But oftentimes, we always try to keep our notes very short. So use short forms. That's what abbreviations are. Draw symbols. If someone's happy, draw a happy face. If the number or the amount of money is increasing in a budget, maybe you draw a dollar sign and an arrow pointing up. So it's up to each of you to find your own note-taking style that works for you. But what we all, I think, should be doing is keeping the notes short, keeping them organized. If you were to write from the top of your page to the bottom, that's going to help you understand the order of the events, right? What you heard first, second, third, and so on. You're listening for the main ideas first, and then those 5 W's that we keep talking about. If you can just get the keywords down, that will be enough to help you answer most of these questions effectively. All right, there are 3 types of questions you must be prepared for at all times during that listening test. So general meaning is the first one listed here. And these are very big, broad scope questions. A classic example might be, what are the man and woman talking about? If I were to ask you about Matthew and Miss Jeffers, who we just heard earlier, and I said, what are they talking about? You would tell me Matthew's being trained on his job responsibilities. That's what the entire conversation is about. So we gather details to answer these general meaning questions from larger parts of the passage. That second type of question, specific information, these are the easiest. Another example I've already asked you is, what is the name of the man? And if you were to look at your notes and you wrote down Matthew, you've got your answer. So when you know which words to look for in your actual notes, it's going to help you the most. Inference, as we said, are the most challenging because the answers are not stated directly in the passage. This is where you use the clues that you've listened to. to make your own assumptions. And you all answered that CELPIP test question correctly. When we were asked what word best describes the man's job, we all concluded it had to have been boring based on the evidence we heard them speak about. Okay, so again, all three of these types of questions we must be prepared for. And it's good to, as I say, take these webinars and the practice test so that you're better prepared for when it's the official test day. So we'll just wrap up here what we're talking about with listening. One huge tip I'll share with you now is because you hear the audio only once, we want you to focus on what you do understand. Take notes and capture what you can. Don't worry if you can't catch it all. You know, I don't want anybody wasting their time worrying on what's already passed because, as I said, you can't listen again. So make sure you're keeping up with the speaker as they talk. Listen first for the main idea that will be presented right near the beginning. Usually you'll get the names or job titles of the people and the main topic. And right from there, you'll start jotting down the specific or the key details as well. We've talked a bit now about listening for the voice, you know, intonation, pausing and stressing words. Those are all helpful clues to help you catch the keywords. As far as the answers go, though, it's important to note that oftentimes the language used in the questions and answers on any language test will be paraphrased or synonyms from the language you'll hear in the audio passage. So your job is to match the meaning. It might not be the exact same vocabulary word, but if you can match the meanings between questions and answers and the source material, that's what's going to help you answer correctly. I've already encouraged you to guess if you don't know an answer, but I think before you make any guess, it's helpful because you have 4 multiple choice answers. If you could eliminate any answers that you know to be wrong, there are usually 1 or 2 that just don't seem right at all. So if we eliminated those, and then maybe we have 2 answers left that we're trying to guess between, you now would have a 50-50 chance of guessing correctly rather than a 1 in 4. So that would be also a good test strategy to use. Okay, so we're done with the listening. I'll just open it up for any last minute questions. In case you do have questions about listening, this might be a good time to address them. And if not, that's fine. I mean, we can always come back at the end of the session as well. I don't see any outstanding questions, so I'll continue on. But as I said, if something comes to mind, please place your question right there in the Zoom chat area. All right, on to the reading test then, because this is the second part of your CELPIP test. There are 4 passages this time, and the fastest it'll take anyone to complete this part would be 43 minutes, and again, up to 56 minutes, depending a little bit on your speed, depending a little bit on which exact test you get in your testing room. So I'll show you an example of your reading screen in just a moment, but we want to note that your reading passage is always going to be on the left-hand side of your computer screen, and the questions and answers will be on the right-hand side. So everything's on the one computer screen, and that's really helpful to organize you. There are timers, as you know, and just like the listening test, your reading passages and questions are going to increase in difficulty as well as the test moves forward. So I'm showing you a really tiny version, I recognize, of a reading part 1, which is called reading correspondence. So I don't want you to hurt your eyes too much trying to read the passage. What I did want to bring to your attention first is on the right-hand side, we've got some reading strategies. And we will answer a practice test question in just a moment using these strategies. So I'll introduce them to you now. The first thing I'd encourage you to do when you start any reading part is to preview your screen. Literally just look to see how long the passage is, look to see how much time is on the clock, and also look to see how many questions you have. It would take you about 3 or 4 seconds at the most to complete that. It's just you're setting yourself up for time management and you're getting acquainted with what your task is about to bring to you. So now that you would be mentally prepared, we move on to step 2, which is to skim read the passage. Now, when we skim, we don't read every word. We don't read every sentence either. You'll notice that any piece of writing will generally have 4 or 5 paragraphs on the CELPIP reading test. In this example, you might not be able to read the words as they're tiny, but you can still see there are 4 distinct paragraphs in this entire email passage. So what I would encourage you to do is to read about the first sentence or 2 of each sentence. Let your eyes quickly scroll over the lines of text, and you're looking just for the key points. Usually that would be the who and the what. And if you could do that for each paragraph, you'd have a very good understanding about the main idea of this whole passage. you'd also know what each paragraph is talking about. There'll be a particular focus. So to skim read the passage, it might take you about 20 or 30 seconds for your reading part one, maybe a bit longer as the passages become more challenging moving forward. But you want to keep the skimming part pretty quick. You're just setting yourself up for success, because now we go to step 3, which is reading the questions. Of the questions and then the answer choices, you yourself are going to click that little drop down arrow inside the white box and open up the 4 answer choices. So looking at the questions and answers, you're going to note the key words. All right, you have to figure out, what is this question asking me to find in the passage? And now that you know what the passage is about in general terms, you can return to the passage and scan. Let your eyes fall quickly over the lines of print, looking just for the key words. There's no point reading parts of this passage that have nothing to do with the question you're answering. So again, when the eyes and the brain know what to look for, it makes it a lot faster and easier to find that information. So once you've located the correct information in the passage, this is where you can slow the reading down a little bit, of course. You might want to read a few sentences around the keywords, and you should then have enough information to answer the question. So for one practice, we're going to have a look at question number 1. So let's make this big enough so at least you can read it. You'll notice I've removed the bottom half of this email because you actually don't need it for this question. You'll notice on the email side, on the left-hand side at the bottom, you can see the name of the writer, which is Adam Stevenson. And at the very top of the email, Adam doesn't know the person to whom he's writing. So he's used this very general expression, to whom it may concern. Go ahead and skim read those 3 paragraphs, if you will. Have a look at the question and answer choices. And as soon as you know the answer, let us know what the answer is. You can do that in the Zoom chat if you wish. I'm going to time you. I'm going to give you 30 seconds and see if it can be done. That's 15 seconds. Let's go another 15 seconds. Okay, that's 30 seconds. Okay, now you do have a set amount of time on your clock to answer all questions. So if you need more than 30 seconds, of course, you could go a little bit longer. But I guess the little push I'm giving each of you is to remember you still have a time limit. You can't afford to spend 2 minutes on one question, for example. I think as a rule of thumb, a general sense of time, if you could still be in the habit of spending about 30 seconds per question as a starting point, I think that's realistic, especially in your reading part 1. You know, a few questions might take a bit longer, but a few questions also you might answer very quickly. But do mind your time. You don't want to devote too much time on any one question, or you might not finish, is the point. Okay, before I confirm the answer, and it does look like everyone has answered the same way in the Zoom chat, which is great. What I hope you did before you answered, as we just talked about, I'd already pointed out the writer's name and reader's name. So before I even looked over here, I just had a quick glance at the 3 paragraphs, and I recognized the keywords in here would talk about an experience with a bus driver. Down here, it looks like Adam has moved. Over here, it looks like he's planning his bus route to get to his new job. So that's really all I did. I just looked at almost the first sentence of every paragraph. And I understand that Adam has moved to a new location, is starting a new job, and something happened with the bus driver. So that much information we have just from skimming. So when now we turn our attention to the questions, it says Adam now lives. Well, we know who Adam is because we know he's the writer. And when we click this little drop-down arrow, we can see for ourselves the answer choices. And all 4 of these answer choices are locations, are they not? They're either cities or perhaps neighborhoods or even particular streets. So that's the next thing I hope you notice is we're looking for a where type detail. And this question, it's a specific detail, isn't it? One of these 4 answers has to be somewhere in the passage telling us where Adam now lives. And when I skimmed, I note the second paragraph talked about him moving. So I'm assuming my answer is probably going to be in paragraph 2. And lo and behold here, Gloucester and downtown, right there. First 2 answer choices. So it's just a matter now of reading those few sentences a little bit more slowly and carefully. So I've gone ahead and highlighted them for us so we can see. And he says, Having recently moved from Gloucester to the downtown area. I don't even have to read anymore. He used to live in Gloucester, we're told. He now lives in the downtown area. And the question says, Adam now lives. So we're just going to go ahead and select in the downtown area. That is indeed the right answer. And I think that is also the answer that you've all selected in the Zoom chat. So well done. Whichever answer you click on, you can see the computer is going to insert the answer for you in green print, just like we see here. If you decide to change your mind, that's okay. You can click on that same answer choice, in this case, in the downtown area. The computer will open up again the answer box, the same answer box with those 4 choices. So you could just click a different answer and the computer will make that change for you. So technically, I suppose you could change your answers multiple times, but remember the time limit. Keep an eye on the timer up top. Make sure that all answers are completed before the time reaches 0. So well done on another question, this one for reading. And again, looking at the 3 types of questions, these are the same 3 types that you would encounter in the listening test. So it looks like we've just answered a specific information question. We knew we were looking for a where detail. We knew the answer choices were all different locations, and we just had to find the one that told us where Adam is now living. And that came right out of the text. Okay, so well done. We've done an inference so far. We've also done a specific information type question. So let's wrap up our reading strategies and we'll get into the fun part, the writing, which is my favorite part of the test. All right, as far as reading goes, I've suggested to skim the main text first. The length of time you spend skimming depends on how quickly you can read to a point, but remember your first reading part's the easiest. I think with practice, it's very possible to skim just the first few sentences as I demonstrated. I think you could do that in about 20 seconds. There are only 4, maybe 5 paragraphs to get through. All right, as the test moves forward, as we mentioned, it will become harder. So you might need a little bit more time, but you don't want to spend any longer than about 40 seconds or so on your reading, just the skim reading. You do, of course, want that general understanding, but you need time to get into the questions. So once you get into those questions, look for the keywords, figure out what you're supposed to be looking for. Is it a location? Is it a person's name? You know, what is it? Is it a when type detail? In the question we did with Adam now living in the downtown, the wording was exactly the same. That was easy for us, right? And in the actual answers and the passage. But remember, especially in the harder parts of this test, it'll be more likely that the answer choices and questions will use paraphrased ideas compared to what you're finding in the passage. So don't let that trip you up. Just be aware of it and keep an open mind. You're always matching the meaning, not necessarily the direct words. And the rest of these strategies are the same as what we've talked about in listening. If you don't know an answer, try to eliminate any incorrect answers. If you still don't know, honestly, just guess. You're not going to lose marks if you're wrong, so you have nothing to lose by guessing. If you do guess correctly, you get a point for the test. And every point you earn, of course, is going to increase your score bit by bit. Whatever we do, we want to answer every question before that timer on the screen gets to 0. Or before you decide to click the next button and move forward, either way. Okay, so that takes us to the end of the reading test. I'll open it up for questions. Are there any questions about reading maybe that come to mind before we move on? We can always return, but sometimes it's nice to tackle those questions as they're top of mind. Okay, I don't see any questions, so that's good news maybe. Let's move on to the writing test. For CELPIP writing, you are going to have 2 writing tasks to complete. The first one's an email. You'll be spending 27 minutes there. The second one is a survey response, and you'll be spending 26 minutes there. So when you do the math, of course, that gives you 53 minutes at the maximum to complete the writing test. Some of you might finish early, and that's fine, but at the very most, 53 minutes to complete the writing sections, both of them. You will have some background information to read first, and that will give you the general context. The specific writing instructions that you must include in your answers will also be located on the computer screen, just to the right-hand side. There are some editing tools. If you want to use them, you can. Things like bolding or underlining or copying, pasting, totally up to you. Nothing to do with your score, of course. It's more for comfort. There is a word counter on the screen, and it's really important to keep an eye there, because your instructions will tell you to write between 150 to 200 words. So watch that word counter and make sure you're within that range. There is a spell check for the writing test as well, which is nice to know. Okay, so here's your question. I'm going to give you, I got about 30 seconds or so. If you could read this question to yourself first, and then we'll spend a few moments talking about it. Okay, that was about 30 seconds. I like 30 seconds as a nice round number just to give you something to aim for. The faster you can read, of course, the more time you have for writing. So again, you might need a little bit longer, and that's totally fine. But try to develop those speed reading abilities at home as you study. It's really going to help, I think. Hopefully by now you've recognized on the left-hand side of your screen, and I'll use my laser pointer here to make sure you're all looking in the right place. The takeaway here is that we had reservations and ate a very expensive meal, looks like, but we were very unhappy about the meal and the service. And there was no manager around. So I guess we left quite unhappy. So we'd want to note that situation first. So when we come over here, we're told who we are meant to email. And it says to write to the restaurant's manager. Okay, that's the very first thing we're going to write. And the writing space, by the way, is down here. So my question to you is, because you're writing to the restaurant's manager, it's probably a stranger. They weren't even on site when you dined. So the question is, are you going to be formal or informal as you start to type in your email? What would you suggest here? What's your instinct telling you to do? Are you going to be very formal with your approach, or are you going to use very casual language? What do you think makes the most sense here? Keeping in mind, it's a manager. Keeping in mind, it's a stranger. So making that decision right away is going to help you formulate the greeting correctly. So if this were my question, I would definitely agree with Hakeem here in this chat box. I'd be going formal. Absolutely. It would be inappropriate to be casual in this situation. So choosing the right tone, choosing the right formality is going to help your score. So if we're being formal, that means our greeting is super easy to write. We don't know the name of this restaurant manager, so we're just going to use the job title as our greeting. We're going to say, "Dear restaurant manager." And that's all we need to do for the greeting. Easy peasy. Don't overthink that. We are reminded to write between 150 to 200 words. You will see the word counter at the bottom of the writing space. It's just not visible here, as you can see. On your email question, you will always have either 3 or sometimes even 4 bulleted points. And these are the main ideas you absolutely must address. You have no choice in the matter. All right. So the first thing that you're going to do in this question, I guess, once you've written your introduction, you're going to state then the problems you had with the food. You're also going to identify the problems with the service, and then you want to make up a solution. So again, the main ideas are given to you, but the details themselves are going to come from your own imagination. This is where thinking about your own life experience is really going to be helpful. To make the writing interesting, sure, but also just to think of ideas quickly. You can make them up. That's totally possible. But usually when we base our ideas on concepts and situations that we know, those ideas come to us a lot quicker. So let's put that into practice and see how it goes. I won't be doing the actual typing or writing of the answer right now, but let's discuss what some of these ideas might look like. In your very first paragraph, of any email, it's meant to be very brief. It gives a little bit of a background information and generally provides the purpose for why you're writing. So that situation on the left of the screen that tells us we had reservations for dinner and so on, we can more or less summarize in our own words the background, but I also want us to add in some specific details, because the more specific details you can include, the better your score. So how about this? Rather than just write about eating at a restaurant in general, can we name the restaurant that we ate at? If this were my answer, that's what I would do. Can any of you give me the name of a restaurant that pops into mind? It says it's an expensive restaurant, so bear that in mind. It's helpful if whatever title you think of sounds like it might be a little fancy. But are there any really fancy restaurants that you've either eaten at or that you know about? Let me know, please, in the Zoom chat here. What's the first restaurant name that comes to your mind? And if you can't think of one, I have lots, but this is your webinar, not mine. So I thought I'd ask you first. Okay, I don't see any suggestions. So I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and suggest this for us because again, we need to keep moving along for time. My advice before I give you some ideas is you can't afford to spend too long thinking on details that should be relatively easy. Thinking of names of restaurants, that should come to any one of us, I would suggest. All right, I'm going to throw out Valentino's. There we go. That was an Italian restaurant that my sister used to waitress at when we were back in high school. So that's where that name comes to mind. And I like my pasta, so why not? Okay, so that's the where type detail. Remember those 5 W's? Who, what, where, when, why? So when I start writing this, I might indicate I ate at Valentino's. I didn't eat there by myself. I would invent some who type details. I would want to think about who I was there. So perhaps I ate at Valentino's with my partner. And then the when detail, that's easy. This happened very recently, we can only assume. So why not just say we had dinner there last night? So right away, my opening sentence might look like, dear restaurant manager, yesterday evening, my partner and I dined at Valentino's restaurant to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. There, I just threw a why detail in. So I'm not technically answering the bulleted points yet. What I am doing is I'm building the content and the interesting details because I know that's going to help my CELPIP score. So I'm setting the stage for what happened. Then I'm going to summarize the situation from the test instructions. I'm not going to copy the words, but in my own language, I'm going to say something like, you know, we've enjoyed, in the past, we've enjoyed dining at your restaurant, but yesterday evening, the food and the service were disappointing. There, I just sort of summarized that in my own words. And then I might come up with a solution. Do any of you have an idea about what you would do in this situation? I'm surely to goodness, we've all had a situation in our own lifetime where we paid for a meal, expensive or not, but it was really not a great meal. And we're feeling very taken advantage of or very unhappy. I know what I would do, but I'm wondering what you would all do. This is addressing that third bulleted point on the screen here. How do we want the restaurant to resolve this problem? Any ideas coming to your mind? Let me know in the Zoom chat area what comes to your mind as quickly as you can. Yeah, Ahmed is suggesting a refund, and that is exactly what I would do. Yeah, I mean, there's other choices in other webinars where I've covered this question with different people thinking. Some people sometimes suggest things like getting a gift card or a coupon, and sure, you could. It's really up to you. But I myself, I'm with Ahmed on this. I'm going with the refund. I just want my money back. Plain and simple. I'm not sure I'd want to go back and eat at this restaurant. So why would a gift card help me, right? It's really up to each one of us. So pick whatever solution comes to your mind. Just make sure it's logical. So after we've introduced and summarized, as I've just demonstrated, I might throw one sentence in to explain, you know, we request, please, that you refund the amount of our bill back to our credit card, since the service and the meal were substandard. Something like that would be fine. We are complaining, yes, but we're trying to use language that is still gentle enough and respectful. That's tone again. We don't want to be angry, rude, or critical at all, not on the CELPIP test or not in the real world. If the manager reads our email and we're threatening and hostile, they're not going to want to give us what we're asking for. So we want to make sure that our language is appropriate. So after we've got that introduction out of the way, you yourselves are going to take time to develop the middle part of your answer. So we've already done the third bulleted point. We've already asked for a refund. So that takes care of resolving the problem. We still have to explain what the problem with the food was and what the problem with the service was. These two topics would be completed in 2 separate paragraphs in the middle of the response. Once again, the more interesting and detailed your response is, the better your score is going to be. So rather than just say the food was not very good, that's way too general. If this were me, I would actually identify the dish I had. And I've already established we're eating at an Italian restaurant. So I might just say, I ordered my favorite dish, the chicken fettuccine Alfredo. But when it arrived at the table, unfortunately, the noodles were cold and there was not very much sauce on the dish. So it lacked all that creamy flavor that I love. Okay, so note what I did. I identified my dish. I didn't just say pasta. I identified the type of pasta dish. And this is true to me. I love my chicken fettuccine Alfredo. That's why that idea came to me. If I'm at an Italian restaurant, that is what I'm ordering. That's what I want you to do with your own life experience. Whatever dish you normally eat, go ahead and throw that into your answer. Okay, and then just ask yourself, what could possibly go wrong with pasta? And for me right away, I just thought of the two first things that came to mind. Mushy noodles or maybe cold noodles, no sauce, base it on real life or make it up. I don't think it's too hard to imagine what might be wrong with a pasta dish. So I might identify my dish. I'd probably also mention the dish that my partner had, since I introduced them in the opening, and do the same thing. I think having two sort of main ideas, in this case, the two different dishes you ordered, and then the specific details or problems with each of them, that would be more than enough for that one paragraph about food. And then you would move on to a different paragraph and likewise complain about service. And I'm going to leave that part with all of you for homework. This, by the way, is one of my favorite writing questions for practice on the CELPIP test because it's just so practical and easy to relate to. Most of us have dined out at a restaurant. Most of us have experienced at least one terrible meal at some point in our lives. So I encourage you, when you have time later today or this week, go back and actually write your answer out to this question, making sure it's about 200 words. That's really going to help you with your practice. At any rate, I hope our discussion right now has given you some ideas about how you'll want to develop your studying and complete your answers on the test. Moving on to writing task 2, you'll notice the screen is similarly structured in the sense that you still have background info on the left and instructions on the right. But this is no longer an email question, it's a survey response. So again, I'll give you about 30 seconds, if you don't mind, to read the question to yourself, and then we'll make sure everybody understands it. Okay, again, you'd have more than 30 seconds to read on your own, but you've got 26 minutes total, and the faster you can read, the more time you have for the writing. On the left-hand side with the background information, you'll notice the city is the one sending you the survey. So for this practice question, we'd have to imagine that we live in this very small town with only 10,000 people as the population. So the whole opinion is all about what the city might do with this plot of green space that's right in the middle of town, it sounds like. So when you look over to your instructions in blue there, it says, choose the option that you prefer. Why do you prefer your choice? Explain the reasons for your choice. And again, the word count is the same as what you had for the email. So you'll notice the two options are listed for you, either option A or option B. You must select one of these two options. You cannot support both. You cannot make up a different option yourself. It has to be one of these two. So click with your mouse in the bubble right beside the option you select. So maybe you would like this green space to be a shopping complex. So click option A, or maybe you want it to be a recreational park. So you would click option B. When you start typing out your answer, I wanted you to notice the question I've got for you here at the top of the screen, or the statement, I guess. If you would like to write an email, in this case to the city, that's absolutely acceptable, but you don't have to formulate this as an email. Some students like to do it that way because you've just completed an email in task 1 and it's really fresh. So if you wanted to use email, I guess your greeting then, it would be formal again. You would probably just say, dear city officials. That's all I would do. And then your very first sentence should absolutely and clearly identify which of these two options you would like and get to the point right away. So if this for me, I'd be going with option B, recreational park. What about the rest of you? Which one would you select? Let me know, please, in the Zoom chat. But whichever option you select, there's no wrong answer. It's just a matter of coming up with your own reasons why it's the better choice. So identify it. Try your very best to use your own language rather than copy all the words from the screen. But I might just say, dear city officials, if this was an email, I would love if the city could turn the green space in town into a recreational park that could be enjoyed by the community. That might be my opening. So very, very clearly, I realize I took the words recreational park right out of the test instructions, but I think that part's okay. I've used my own words around the rest. All right, so that's my opening. And then I would want to come up with at least 2, if not 3 reasons why that would be the case, why it would be better than having a shopping complex. So you can see there are some details there that we can use from the test instructions. It says that the park would have a sports complex, a large green area, and a small petting zoo. So you're welcome to use those general ideas, but you also want to develop them. So right off the top of my head, I think it's obvious to state that if the citizens of our community have access to a large sports arena, they can be involved in team sports like soccer and baseball and hockey year round, irregardless of the weather outside. There'd be a sheltered roof. So having that sports complex accessible promotes physical activity. That's kind of my first point. And then I might start a new paragraph and talk all about how families can spend quality time together, because there'll also be some animals on site and a small zoo and so on and so on. A large green area. I'm imagining families having picnics together there in the summertime and going for walks, enjoying a coffee. So once again, it boils down to perhaps your own life experience. If wherever you live in the world, I trust you've seen a park at some point in your life, and I'm hoping you've walked through a park. And I want you to think about how people in the community would enjoy using a park. You can draw in those activities. Perhaps they're activities you do or activities you've seen others do. And that's, again, where you come up with these ideas very quickly and make them very interesting. Okay, so that's just a quick example on how you might support option B. Again, you don't have to do option B. You could talk about a shopping complex. But your success in answering question writing task 2 is coming up with reasons to support your answer that are both logical and also detailed enough to persuade the reader that your idea is valid. So that's the whole gist of it there. Okay. Before we finish off with the writing, I did want to point out to you the specific skills categories that the rating team is going to be reading through for you to demonstrate in order to score as well as you can. So I'll let you know, first of all, that for CELPIP writing, the test is scored by an AI-human hybrid system. So what that means is the scoring assessment combines artificial intelligence with a human rating panel. So that's why I refer to them as a rating team. They're working in tandem. So the team is tasked with reading your email and your survey response. They are looking for you to demonstrate strengths in those 4 key categories listed on the left of this chart. So content and coherence is the very first category. And I think we just did quite a bit of work with that, looking at what types of main ideas and then supporting details and examples can we develop to make this writing quite interesting. All right, so it's really key. The more specific, the better. Remember, we're not just saying that we didn't enjoy our pasta. We're saying things like, my chicken fettuccine Alfredo was cold when it arrived and there was no Alfredo sauce, right? As specific as possible. Vocabulary right below that is, of course, important as well. We want words that make sense. That's always step 1. They have to be accurate in meaning. We also want to make sure, though, that the words you're choosing as you write are suitable for the situation and are naturally used. That is as important as choosing accurate meanings as well. Now, once you have accurate and natural word choices, the next step when you study at home is to develop or widen the range of your vocab so you can present to the rating team quite a variety of words that you know how to use well. Once again, the more precise and specific your words, the better. Below that, you see readability. This primarily assesses your writing mechanics and grammar skills. So think about things like your spelling, your punctuation, your spacing. Are you writing complete grammatically correct sentences? And are you able to develop and write some complex structures, not just simple sentences, that sort of thing? All of your grammar skills are evaluated here too. Hopefully you know how to paragraph your work appropriately too. That's the icing on the cake, as we say, right? So intermediate to advanced level writing should be paragraphed appropriately. And right below that, you'll notice is task fulfillment. So this is where the word count comes into play. And we've talked about that by now. The tone, we've also discussed that, whether you're being formal or casual, using words that are still respectful at all times, right? That's the tone. We must completely answer the question. That goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Remember, in your email question for our practice today, we had 3 bulleted points. That means you have to address all 3 of them. If you forget a point, you no longer have a complete answer. and your score would be lower in this one category. And last but not least, relevance is of course important. All details you include must address the test question. We don't want any ideas that are off topic and cause confusion as a result. So you are going to get a score on both of the writing tasks. You might have a different score. It all depends on the question and how well you develop each answer. All right, but you'll get the 2 writing scores, and then those 2 scores would be averaged together and rounded to the nearest CELPIP level. So it's the average of the scores that's going to show on your official score report for your writing score overall. Okay, and again, your score will come from a combination of your performance in all 4 areas. So it's great if you've got a wonderful vocab, you'll probably score quite well there, but you still want to practice at home, including interesting specific details and making sure you know how to write complex sentences and grammatically correct structures and so on, right? So don't just study one of these 4 categories at home. Make sure you're able to demonstrate strengths across all 4. That's the best way to improve your score. So that's your writing. I always find the writing, that's one of my favorite parts of the test. I don't know about you, but I love to write as I love to think of ideas. So hopefully the discussion we've just had will spark a little study session with yourselves. Let's move on to speaking now. Speaking is the last part of your CELPIP test. So that's good news, I suppose. There are 8 tasks that you will complete here, but it goes by so quickly. Within 15 minutes, the speaking test is completed. And that is because you're going to have a little bit of time to prepare, usually 30 seconds, sometimes 60 seconds. And that time has been given for you to read the test question and to start thinking about your details. When it's time to speak, remember you'll speak loudly, or not loudly, but in a normal voice, we'll say, into your microphone that's attached to the headset. And you'll record your answers, and those recordings are going to be sent out to a different team of raters. So there's a group that assesses just writing in CELPIP and a different group that assesses the speaking. And they're all human raters, by the way, for the speaking assessment. So they'll be listening in to these recordings you've made, and they'll give you a score, a level score on each of those 8 responses you've given. And those 8 scores will be averaged together, and whatever that average number is, that's what shows on your official score report as your speaking score overall. Now, half of the test will give you text-based questions, and the other half of the speaking task will have an image. And I'll just quickly show you a few examples so you'll see what I mean here. This just happens to be a speaking task 2, and task 2 always asks you to talk about your own personal experience. So you'll notice the preparation time up top, it says 30 seconds, and then recording time is 60 seconds. So that's pretty standard. So that's why I say if we can develop our ability to skim read pretty quickly, we want to read the question in 15 seconds at the most, I would say, because then you still have 15 seconds to think about some of your ideas. So whatever the question's asking you to focus on, it's important to note that during the prep time. Think of at least your main points that you're going to include as you speak. You might have to make up some of your specific details and examples as you're talking, as I demonstrated earlier, talking about that recreational park with the writing question. Here's an example of what one of the image tasks might look like. So this happens to be a speaking task 3, describing a scene. So you can see there's a picture there, and we're being asked to describe some things that are happening as well as we can. So once again, 30 seconds to look at the picture and start getting familiar with it, maybe pick and choose a few parts to talk about, get some strong vocabulary started. And then when it comes time to speak, as you know, you'll be filling 60 seconds of talking time. When you practice at home, I would encourage you to set a timer for the 30 seconds prep and the 60 seconds recording, just so you start to develop a sense of how many details is possible to include in the length of time. I think that's really helpful. Speaking task 5, I simply wanted to point out as it's very different from the other 7 speaking tasks. So as you can see, you do have pictures involved, but this is the only part of your speaking test that is divided into 2 separate parts. So if you just wanted to look to the left to start with, this would be the only thing you would see on your computer screen. This is what I mean. So this right here, imagine this is the computer screen in front of you in the testing room. So when you begin your speaking task 5, of course, you would read the info. This question tells you that your family wants to buy a new home, but they don't know which one. So you have a full minute just to read all the information and click with your mouse on the picture of the home that you think is the best choice. You're not speaking yet. You're just thinking and getting set up. So let's pretend you clicked this one. Looks like I'll call that a single detached family home to sound fancy. So we click there, let's pretend. When the 60 seconds is finished, the computer moves you forward automatically to part 2. So now this is the only thing you would see on your computer screen. You'll never see this again, right? Just one thing at a time. So this is the picture that we clicked on earlier. So it is still there, but we have another 60 seconds because our family, I guess, is now suggesting a different type of dwelling. This one looks like a red cottage in the woods. So with the minute you have now, you'd really want to focus on the details about each home. And you're trying to come up with ways that when you speak, you will be talking directly to your family in a role play. And you would want to think of reasons why this home or these details are better for the family than this home would be. So you'd have 1 minute to complete that role play. All right, so it sounds a little bit tricky if you've never done it yourself, but I think once you take, there's 2 free practice tests right on the CELPIP website. And once you've completed your speaking task 5 once or twice, it will be very clear. Just bear that in mind. You're only ever talking about the pictures that are directly in front of you when you're recording your voice. So think of it that way, and you'll keep yourself on track. Just a bit of a heads up for when you get studying at home. Anyway, before we get into the response analysis today, I did want to just remind you about how the speaking test is going to be assessed. So I already pointed out that you've got a different group of raters separate from the writing team. The speaking raters are all human. I mentioned that as well. There's no AI involved in their assessment. They are still going to listen to the recordings and assess you still on the same qualities from the content, from the vocabulary, and the task fulfillment. Those 3 categories are virtually the same. The only minor difference under task fulfillment is that you wouldn't have a word count because you're not typing anything in. Instead, we just refer to the assessment as the length. If you're asked to speak for 60 seconds, you want to get close. Doesn't have to be perfect, bear in mind. But if you spoke for, say, 55 seconds and gave a very strong answer, great. Your score will be quite happy with you there for task fulfillment. The one key difference, though, in your speaking assessment compared to the writing is that 3rd category down that says listenability. So in this case, because the rating team does not have a transcript of your answer, they only have the recordings of your voice. So they clearly can't assess you on things like paragraph structure and such, right? That wouldn't make sense. They're going to instead assess mainly your speech presentation skills. So think about your rhythm, your pronunciation, your intonation, right? Hopefully we're speaking fairly smoothly without pausing or interjecting too frequently. We don't want to interrupt ourselves as we talk. That's the part that takes practice, as I'm sure you all know. Your grammar and your sentence structure are going to be evaluated too, and you need to know that. Even though the rating team does not have a transcript, they can tell just by listening to you if you are speaking in sentences that are grammatically correct. They're hoping that you'll include more complex structures rather than just short, simple ideas. The more complexity, the better the score. And that goes for all these categories. Okay, good variety is also helpful. So each of your 8 tasks I mentioned will be scored based on these 4 categories. Your 8 scores overall will be averaged together to give the overall speaking score. So with that in mind, let's get into the hands-on portion of today's lesson. We're going to actually look at or listen to 4 different responses from real CELPIP test takers, all taken from a past test. So we'll start off with the writing. We've got 2 responses that we're going to analyze based on a particular test question that I'll share with you in just a moment. So I'm reminding you how your test is scored. We've already seen this chart today, so we know that level 12 is the top score. I'll let you know right now that of the 2 writing and 2 speaking responses we're going to cover together, we've selected them purposely because in random order, these responses have earned either a level 5, a level 8, a 9, or a 12. Okay, so again, random order. It doesn't necessarily mean the first response I show you got the 5. We're just going to sort of look at them as they come. And that's going to help us all really think about the skills that we're seeing. So for each of these cases, I'm going to present to you first the CELPIP test question. Then we're going to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of the responses I will share with you. And then before I reveal the score these people actually did earn, I'm going to launch an online Zoom poll. And I'm hoping that you will guess of these 4 levels available to you, which score you believe that person earned. And of course, then I'll let you know if you're right or not. So by the end of this little activity, you hopefully will be able to tell the difference yourselves between more of a beginner level, which is level 5. Your 8 and 9 is intermediate, sort of approaching intermediate. And of course, your level 12 is considered expert. So something for everyone today, as we say. Anyway, here's the question we're going to look at. If you could have a quick little read over, I guess, of this. Okay, hopefully we have the gist. We are to write to the chief librarian, that much we know. Remember, we're supposed to be asking that the library remain open every single day. And then there are the 3 bulleted points. These are the main ideas we have to address. It's up to each of us to think of our own ideas about how we want to develop those and make them interesting. So I'm going to, first of all, show you the question we're going to workshop. Here it is. Or not so much workshop, but analyze. If you look to the very bottom, first of all, you'll notice that the name of this test taker is Larry. You can see the signature. And at the very top, it looks like Larry, he's written, "Dear Sir, Madam." We'll talk about that in a moment. But for right now, if you could kindly read over Larry's response, and if you have any ideas right now about what he's done well and maybe what he wants to improve, feel free to share those in the Zoom chat. I will guide our discussion in a moment. Okay. I see some things that are done quite well, but there are some obvious weaknesses to me. Shall I open it up to you first? Is anybody brave enough to suggest a couple of ideas in the Zoom chat? And it's okay if not. I will certainly guide us, but sometimes it's nice to have you do your own thinking first. Okay, bio is concerned a little bit about the tone. So, okay. I don't see anything there that looks rude to me, but we'll come back to that. Yeah, we will definitely analyze the tone. And maybe bio, if you could mention what it is that made you wonder if Larry was being respectful. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So we've got a couple of you pointing out really, really tiny grammatical errors. Yeah, I noticed a few of those. Sure. Are there any really, really obvious weaknesses, though, that you might want to point out? Just have a look at the way this is organized on the computer screen. Is there something that jumps out at you? Precious is sort of onto it, but hasn't quite nailed it yet. Precious is wondering about spacing. Okay, bio has sort of been more precise about it. Yeah, there's no paragraphing here. And the structure is completely wrong. Yeah, so that's the very first thing I noticed, even before I started reading for detail and vocabulary. I looked at this and went, uh-oh, there's no paragraphs. So because there are no paragraphs, it makes it really hard for the reader to understand where the purpose statement is and understand where ideas begin and end, right? So because of that, what I had to do for all of us, this is me, all these fancy colors you see on the screen, this is what I did, because I wanted us all to be able to really look at how Larry has addressed all 3 of those bulleted points. So I've chunked them down into different colors. Had Larry paragraphed his work correctly, he should have different paragraphs for each of these colored sections of text. But we'll have to forgive him for the lack of paragraphing for now, as we can't go back in time and change it at this point. I will point out that the purpose statement, remember this whole question asks us to write to the chief librarian. So that greeting at the top shouldn't be dear sir, madam. That's really general and it doesn't even make sense, right? Sir, madam, is that one person? Is that two people? So always be precise. If you don't know the name, just use the job title. So dear chief librarian, let's just pretend it says that. At the very first sentence up top, you can see I bolded for you. It says he's writing to question the current opening hours of the local public library. Now, I want you to ask yourself for a minute, pretend you are the chief librarian and you are reading this. And the first thing you read is that Larry is questioning the current hours. At that moment in time, do you understand what Larry wants you to do? Yes or no? Let me know in the Zoom chat. Right off the top, right? When the first thing you read, you know Larry's unhappy, but do you know what he wants? Yes or no? And I'm going to have to say, no, I've not a clue. If this were me and if this were my email, I wouldn't know what Larry's asking me to do. So our jobs as a writer, and also particularly in email writing, to make the reader's job really easy, we want to be precise. I think what Larry did well, if you look to the very bottom, again, I bolded for you, where it says there is a great interest in having the library open 7 days a week. That is so precise. We now know that Larry wants this library open every day. Had Larry started with that purpose statement, I think it would have been a lot more clear for the reader. So that would be my one adjustment if I could sit down with Larry and we could revise this to improve it a little bit. So I'm glad to see there is a purpose there and we eventually get to it, but it might have been better to lead with that just given how general his opening statement is. So there's a little structural element I would adjust. Let's get into the first bulleted point from the computer, which is the light blue ideas there. Remember that the instructions tell us, or told Larry, I guess, to describe why the library is so important to him. And this detail has been done very, very well. I love that he either makes up details about how he's studying English and law at university, or maybe that's true for him now. Either way, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. That detail is perfect for why somebody might want to use a library. So I love how he added that in of his own imagination. All right. So once he's set that introductory context detail about studying English and law at university, he then answers the actual question and says, the library is a great resource. That's his main idea. And then he gives us two different specific details of support. So how is it a great resource? He tells us there's a vast array of textbooks, and it's also a quiet, relaxing place to study. This is textbook perfect as far as the structure goes. Okay, so a little bit of background, main idea, and two pieces of supporting details. Nice vocab too, wouldn't you say? Vast array of textbooks. That sounds pretty good to me. So that should have been the end of that paragraph, by the way. We should have an empty space. And then the next paragraph is going to talk about why the library being closed on Sundays and Mondays just doesn't work for Larry. So these are the details you can see now in green. So he first of all starts off by stating the current hours. We're currently closed on Sundays and Mondays. Remember how just earlier he mentioned he was a university student. So I love how he starts this idea. He reminds the chief librarian as a full-time student, right? So the coherence is strong. Everything is adding up. And he says he has lectures Monday to Friday. So he's either making that up or maybe that's true for him now. Either way, it's great. As a full-time student with lectures Monday to Friday, he says, these days are important to me because they are my only opportunity to study, as I also have a part-time job on Saturdays. Okay, if I just sort of step back from the ideas on screen and think of this in general terms, I believe what Larry is trying to do is to present to the librarian simply how busy his schedule is. Clearly, if he's a full-time student and he works part-time and so on, you could see how having the library open 7 days a week would certainly help Larry because it just gives him any day, any time he has that he could go in and study. So the logic makes sense in that general way, but I want you to examine the structural elements of the sentence here. And I see something we definitely want to improve. So he started off, remember, by mentioning that the library is currently closed Sundays, Mondays. That's fine. Then he says he's got lectures Monday to Friday. The next thing he says here are these days are important to me. It's not clear which days Larry is referring to. Because he chose to put this idea here directly following Monday to Friday, grammatically, what he's telling us is Monday and Friday are important to me because they're my only opportunity to study. That's not really the case, is it? If he's in school Monday to Friday, he doesn't really have time to study. I think what he means is Sundays and Mondays. But that doesn't even make sense either because he's in school on Monday. See what I mean? He does have a job on Saturday. So technically, when you really break down all of his schedule, it looks to me like the only day he could study would be Sunday. Do you see what I'm getting at? So the logic in a general glance kind of makes sense. He's busy. He wants the library open all the time, but he really wants to fine tune or refine the way he's presented his schedule, right? So tidy up which days he could actually use the library and place words like this after the appropriate days of the week to really clarify it for us as well. Okay, so that takes care of that idea. That's the second bulleted point. The third bulleted point in burgundy happens to be from the test instructions, happens to be how people could use the library if it were open every day of the week. So this should be a separate paragraph. And as you can see, Larry did not answer this question. All he says is that the library is a valuable resource for the local community. He doesn't give us any examples. I mean, off the top of my head, I might suggest that ESL students use the library as a conversation club. Child minding is provided through the local branch. Story time is provided for young children. Whatever idea pops into your head is fine, as long as it's something that could happen at a library that shows how the community could use it. But Larry did not address that point at all. So from a task fulfillment standpoint, his answer is a little bit negatively affected. He did a great job on point 1, which is the blue text here. He did an adequate job on the second point in green. We just have to revise the wording a bit to clarify, but he didn't answer that third point in burgundy here, right? So task fulfillment is not considered complete. Do not let this happen to you in your practice or on the official test. Make sure you have addressed every part of the test. Don't give away an opportunity, as Larry has done, to support a better score. Okay, now that's just one mistake. Let's see how he's done in other aspects of assessment. So can you have a quick look at Larry's response there? I've taken the colors off to make it easier for you. Can you maybe in the Zoom chat suggest a couple of words that you believe represents Larry's best vocabulary? We're looking for evidence of accurate word choice, but also that is used naturally, and hopefully that's interesting and precise. So what would you suggest maybe represents his best vocabulary? Let's have a few examples, and then I'll highlight or underline a few for you as well. Okay, a couple ideas are trickling in here to the Zoom chat. Vast array. Yeah, that was the first thing I noticed. Yeah. And sometimes too, you'll notice, especially in writers that are more practiced, you'll notice it's not just single words that people are putting together to produce meaning. Quite often, a good telltale sign that somebody has a fairly strong foundation in writing is when they're able to do what Larry's done. He's able to grab groups of words together, like quiet, relaxing place to study and my only opportunity to study, right? So these words aren't necessarily fancy, but they don't have to be fancy. It would be incorrect to use really complex, archaic language, wouldn't it? He's just stating his case to the librarian. And I think these words definitely demonstrate that he has a good handle on using words quite accurately. And these words anyway show a decent variety. He's not just repeating the same words here, but there are 2 words I noticed that have been repeated quite a few times. And I went ahead and also identified those for you. Larry has overused the word current or currently. I see that 4 times. And that word local, he's written it about 5 times. So even though these words make sense, repeating them so often does not demonstrate to the rating team that you have that range of vocab that they're hoping to see. So my best advice when you've written out your first draft of your answer, hopefully you're saving yourself time on the clock that you can reread your work. And if you notice you've repeated the words, you can go in and change some of them. So think of paraphrasing or using synonyms to improve that. It will certainly help a better vocabulary score. Okay, now into readability. Readability, we already said there are no paragraphs, and that is actually quite a serious mistake. It makes it hard for the reader to understand how the ideas fit together. So that one we've talked about. I also wanted to look at sentence structure with you, because sentence structure, when we're able to write with more complex ideas, is a way to strengthen your score. And these examples I've underlined for you are all examples of complex sentence structures, right? That word as, or as you can imagine, it's setting Larry up with the opportunity to combine shorter ideas together in a longer sentence that does show complexity. So yes, this is definitely a strength, but I want you to look at all of those sentence structures I've underlined for you. Do you see the weakness as well? Can you see again the repetition? As you can imagine, as a quiet, relaxing place to study, as a full-time student, as I also have a part-time job, as you yourself know. So even though Larry can definitely write a complex sentence correctly, he has overused, he has repeated that exact same structure with the exact same conjunctions. So complexity, yes, but variety, no. That would be considered a weakness. So this is exactly how the assessment teams will look at your responses. They are looking for strengths, but they will also find weaknesses and they will balance them together. Okay. There are a few grammatical errors, and I will quickly point them out to you here. You're going to notice that there are several little commas that are missing. And just in case you can't see them, I'll point them out here with my laser pointer. So there are just a couple of little commas that if we added them in, it would definitely help smooth out the connecting ideas. So there are mistakes, yes. But I think even without the commas there, we can still understand the gist of the idea. I think one of you pointed out earlier that Larry did not use capital letter I's, and he should have. So yes, these are mistakes, but you can see as well that they're very small mistakes. Even though it's wrong, we still fully understand the idea. So making the odd little mistake like this is not going to have too much of an impact on your score. That's the good news about CELPIP. Even with mistakes, you can still score quite highly, provided your mistakes are small and don't affect our ability to understand. Okay, you might have noticed this one as well. This would be a verb form. The library is closed on Sundays and Mondays, not closes. But again, I think we could assume or understand the meaning. This is probably, apart from the lack of paragraphing, this would be the most serious mistake. It's what's called a sentence fragment. It's an incomplete sentence. We still know the idea, but again, if we wanted to polish the work, we'd want to learn how to correct these mistakes. So sure, there are some grammatical errors. Luckily for Larry, there's nothing there that prevents us from understanding the ideas. So there might be a slight impact on the score, but it's certainly not going to lower the score unduly. Think of it that way. And last but not least, before you guess what Larry earned as his score, I will point out task fulfillment. I will point out that the word count is correct. It is between 150 to 200 words, so that's great. I think his tone is appropriate. I didn't see any follow-up from our one student in the chat box that suggested he was rude. I didn't see anything there that indicated the tone was rude. I mean, I'm looking at his opening, dear Sir, Madam, and at the end, yours sincerely. His closing statement, I'm looking forward to hearing your opinion. So I think his tone is just fine. It's formal and it's respectful. The weakness, though, with task fulfillment would certainly be, remember, he didn't give us any details to suggest why or how the local library could be used. So that definitely would be the problem area there. Anyway, with that in mind, here's what we'll do. I'm going to launch an online Zoom poll. And if you're taking this session from a computer, you should be able to see the Zoom poll. Not so sure if you can see it on your phone, but let me know. You can see the scores available to you in this Zoom poll right now. This response earned either a level 5, 8, 9, or 12. So go ahead and choose whichever one you think best reflects Larry's ability. These are anonymous assessments, so don't worry if you're wrong. That's not a problem. You're the only one that knows which level you've selected. I'll give you about 10 more seconds, and then I'm going to share the poll results with you so you can see how your guess measures up to everybody else's online here. Okay, that's probably enough time. We've got lots of people jumping in there with their guesses. That's great. Here are the results that you've just selected yourselves. Looks pretty, actually, we're at a dead tie for level 5 and 8, which is funny. Just coincidental, I mean by that. And then we've got a pretty close number, though, for level 9. So you're actually fairly evenly divided between levels 5, 8, and 9. Now, nobody chose 12, and I'm pleased to see that. This is definitely not expert proficiency level 12, but it has to be one of the other 3. So let's clear the poll here from the screen, and I will reveal the score and see what you think. Ta-da! This is a CELPIP level 9. Level 9. So about a third of you guessed that one correctly. What are your thoughts about that? Any reactions? Either way. Are we surprised? Do we understand why this is a level 9? What do you think? Yeah, level 9 is, think of it as sort of that intermediate level where writers are starting to show really good control over some complex structures. The good takeaway here with what Larry's done, and the reason why I love sharing this particular response with you, is even though there were no paragraphs at all, even though that sentence structure was quite repetitive, and so were a few vocabulary words, sure, we identified those as weaknesses. But do you remember that rating checklist I shared with you with those 4 categories? And there have to be at least about 20 different skills or factors that are being assessed. Each of those 4 categories alone has about 4 or 5 particular skills that are being assessed. So even though Larry, didn't paragraph and didn't show much variety with his sentence structure, he still did so many things very, very well. He did eventually, anyway, get to his purpose. We understood why he was writing. A lot of his vocab, apart from those few repeated words, was quite high level. Vast array of textbooks, my only opportunity, and so on. The grammatical errors we saw were very small, were so unimportant that we had no trouble whatsoever understanding the rest of the ideas. And that is a really important factor for each of you to simply understand now and internalize. I'll say this now, and I will repeat it many times in all of my webinars. The rating team does not expect you to be perfect. It is absolutely fine and acceptable and okay if you have a few mistakes. Even level 12 samples will probably have a few mistakes, right? Nobody expects perfection. What they do expect and hope from you is that you are demonstrating enough strengths in all 4 areas and that the weaknesses you do have are small and minor, more or less like Larry's were. So yeah, you can still earn a decent score. Level 9 is a very high level, very good score, and so on. Okay, have a look at your second response. We'll just call this one response B. It's to the same question though. So at a quick glance down towards the bottom, I see Peter is the name of this CELPIP test taker. And towards the top, oh good, Peter has his greeting fine. Dear Chief Librarian. Go ahead, I'll give you about 30 or 40 seconds to skim this over and we'll do a quick discussion about skills. Okay. You might not have finished the whole email, but I think even after reading that first paragraph, you can get a really good sense about what Peter's abilities are like. So the last one we just looked at with Larry was level 9. So start already in your mind imagining, is Peter's writing stronger than Larry's? Is it about the same? Is it perhaps weaker, right? These are the questions I want you to start asking yourself. So just to kickstart our discussion, what I've done for content and for structure is you'll notice that the purpose statement in Peter's email actually comes at the end as well, sort of like what Larry did. But Peter explains his reasons so well with proper paragraphing that it makes sense here at the very end for Peter to come out and request the library. He says, please consider my request to keep this important municipal service open 7 days a week. Very high level advanced vocabulary, right? Important municipal service is a very precise way to say library. So we can definitely see all of the vocabulary skills coming to good play. Notice that every single paragraph discusses one of those bulleted points from the test instructions. So this first one is why the library is important to him. That second paragraph discusses why the opening hours don't work for him. And he does indeed include an example of how the local community might use the library. His 2 examples, you'll note, are about having book clubs and meet the author events. So already the structure of Peter's email the way he's organized his paragraphs, as well as the way he's addressed each task fully and completely. He's clearly demonstrated those skills better than what we saw from Larry. Now, those are only just a few skills. We still have to talk about the others, but let's get into that now. Pretty much all the details in every single paragraph are precise and they're also appropriate. So just have a look at that first paragraph again, the one where he's saying how the library is important to him, right? So he doesn't just talk about the library in general like Larry did. You'll notice he actually names the library. He says it's Toronto's public library. And then he goes so far as to give us the branch. It's the branch on Elm Street. So that's what I mean when I say the more specific and interesting you can be with your details, the higher your content score is going to be. Larry didn't do any of these things. He still scored level 9, which is a decent score for sure. But Peter is going far above in effort and in creativity. Now, I think Peter's reasons for why that library is important to him are very similar to Larry's. Remember how Larry said it was a vast array of textbooks? Peter also mentions a range of books, but he again takes it a step further. He cites both fiction and nonfiction. He's giving examples. Larry did not think to do that. So this is yet another example of how the content in Peter's response is definitely more advanced. And he throws in a different idea, contemporary DVDs and CDs, and so on and so on. Every single paragraph has its own specific, interesting details that are very relevant and appropriate and logical. So this is the habit that we want to develop if we can as we study and then as we perform on the test. Okay, on to vocab. I mean, I could ask you to point out any words that impress you, but you had the pick of the litter here, as we say. So many words to choose from. Even in the very first line up top, rather than just say library, Larry refers to the library as a hidden gem. Just think about how creative that is. A gem is a precious stone, right? Like a diamond or a ruby or an emerald. And we know that these gemstones are very expensive. So when you think of that comparison, it's like a metaphor for the library. If the library is a gem, it also means that the library is really valuable. So this is a very abstract approach to use creative vocabulary and meanings to enhance Peter's overall message. So not only is it great because it has fiction, nonfiction books, and so on, he's referring to the library as a hidden gem to begin with, and so on. Lots and lots of great vocabulary. Nothing there that puzzles us or makes us wonder for meaning, which is great. Okay, and we already know that we have proper paragraphs, so that's a step in the right direction to make this easy to read. But his sentence structure, once again, it's complex, but it has the variety that Larry's email earlier was missing. Larry did write grammatically correct sentences, but he overused that expression, as you yourself know. In Peter's writing here, what I've done is circled for you a variety of different connecting words and conjunctions. So since, specifically, however, when, those two sentences you see in blue that I've underlined for you are also showing different structures in writing. In that middle paragraph, he says, as I have classes Tuesday, he's included that detail as a secondary detail inside what we call parentheses. And he's done that correctly. So that is an advanced level structure. In that third paragraph, this is an imagined situation or a conditional idea. So it would be a great opportunity, right, for more people to enjoy the library. So Peter's gone all out and shown us this variety that the rating team is hoping to see. Now, there are still a few grammatical errors. As I said, nothing's perfect, it would seem. It's hard to write a perfectly crafted response, especially in a time limit on a test. Just like Larry did, Peter also forgot to put in some commas, and I went ahead and highlighted those in yellow for you. He forgot a word in the second paragraph, should be I am. And I think just like Larry as well, Peter also has a fragment at the very end of his first paragraph. It's not a complete sentence. Oh, and in the sign off at the bottom, Peter accidentally put a capital letter R instead of a smaller case. So you might have noticed some of these little tiny mistakes, but once again, they're so small, they don't affect our ability to understand the meaning. So they wouldn't have a tremendous impact under that readability score as a result. There aren't so many errors that we're puzzled. Okay, and tone. Tone is quite respectful. I think both men wrote quite a respectful message. But look at the language that Peter uses here. Please consider my request, and so on. His word count is acceptable, just like Larry's was. But notice that Peter has about 30 words more than what Larry did. So it's no surprise to us then that Peter was able to include so many more specific details. If you write closer to 200 words, usually the details and the vocab are also going to be strengthened because you just have more to say as long as it's on topic and answering the question. So all the way around, I am very impressed with Peter's writing, as I'm sure you are too. But just for the heck of it, why don't we get this poll online? I just put a new poll up online here. What level do you feel Peter has probably earned based on our discussions? We already know that Larry earlier got a level 9. So always think about that first. You know what level 9 looks like. So now think about Peter's ability. Is it better than Larry's in all 4 areas? Is it about the same? Is it weaker? These are sort of general ways maybe to think about scoring. I'll share with you the results in just a moment, and I'm not surprised at all by them. In fact, I'm quite pleased by your results. Here they are. Okay, so almost every single person here suggests that this is probably a level 12. And you'd be absolutely correct. Yes, this is indeed one way to achieve a level 12, which is the top score that anybody could achieve on the CELPIP test in any one language component. And I love showing this example in particular because there were some weaknesses, right? I pointed out to you where some of those little tiny missing commas were and the odd little punctuation or sentence fragment was. So even with a few mistakes, Peter has demonstrated so many strengths across all 4 of those categories that the rating team is assessing that he's been able to achieve this level 12 anyway. So that's how the scoring works. All right, so far so good. Let's finish off today. I've got 2 speaking responses that I wanted to play for you. So same type of assessment, except this time instead of reading, we're going to be listening per se. So here's the question. This is going to be a giving advice question from speaking task 1. You'll notice that you would have 30 seconds to read the question and you would speak for a full 90 seconds. So go ahead and read the question, please. Did you notice there's no name in this question? So what I would advise you do is, since you're role playing, it would be nice if you could just make the name up. You just know it's a friend and it's a woman. All it says is she is not sure about moving so far away from her friends. So whatever woman's name comes to mind, that's what I would do first. I would greet my friend and probably congratulate her on getting a job, right? That's establishing your nice, friendly, supportive tone. And then you want to come right out with the advice. So maybe think of 2 or 3 pieces of advice that would help her weigh the pros and cons of moving. And for each idea or a piece of advice you come up with, you want to give some very relevant supporting detail. So rather than us think about our own ideas here, I wanted to play for you a man's response to this question on his test. Now, remember, on the real test, the rating team does not have a transcript, but we are going to listen and also follow a transcript that I've created for you, just to make sure you can all see the words that you're hearing. Because after we've listened, I'm going to be asking you some questions about this man's speech. So think about his pronunciation, and is he talking at a good speed, and is he interjecting? So we'll analyze those first. We'll do a quick look at grammar and sentence structure, and then we'll get into his content. All right, so let's listen now, and we'll see how well he does.
First, I'd like to say congratulations to you for your graduation. And I heard that you get offer from overseas. I think it's a good opportunity for you because it's a wide world, and based on my experience, when I get offer from overseas, I start looking for the company, do this research and find as much as you can information about the cities that you will live in, and you better find out the weather there. You can't because you need to buy clothes that are appropriate with the weather, and also you need information about how to open a bank account there, and you need to know if you have any friends.
Okay, he got cut off there, by the way. If you get cut off at the end of the speaking time, as you can see, the microphone will just turn right off when time is up. We want to wrap up our final point before that happens, if we can at all help it. If you're cut off though, and it's obvious you're finishing up and you've given lots of detail, it's really not going to affect your performance. So don't stress too much about it. But we do want you to practice in time at home so that this doesn't happen on the actual test. Anyway, let's quickly talk about the man's speech because it's really fresh in our memories. Really quickly, do you think his pronunciation was clear? Would you say yes or no? I'm just curious to see how you assess this as you were listening. How would you answer that? Imagine you're on the rating team here, on the speaking team. Do you think you'd be able to understand this recording, the man's speech? Yes or no? Just pronunciation. We're not yet getting into the other factors. One thing at a time. Just pronunciation. This is a very, very step-by-step approach, but this is exactly which factors are important for your score. And I'm pleased to see everyone agrees that pronunciation, just fine. Yes, I agree with you. Let's move on. What about interjections? The interjections are the ahs and the ums. I've included the interjections in this transcript. You can have a quick glance to see how many ahs and ums you can find. Do you feel that this man interjected too much to the point that it interrupted the rhythm? Yes or no? Is it a problem? Yes or no? Just interjections. That's all we're talking about right now. And it looks to me like you all would agree. Yeah, I think there probably were a few too many ahs and ums. And likewise, pauses. They kind of go hand in hand here. It wasn't just the interjections. It was also stopping and pausing and thinking. All right. On top of that, I would say the volume was fine. That's another aspect of speech. But I think the speed was a little bit slow. And I guess, again, that sort of goes hand in hand with the pausing. So we definitely have some weak areas of just the listenability or the speech presentation. In my humble opinion, as a very experienced English teacher, I believe that this man's vocabulary skills or his grammar structures are more at the beginner level. And sometimes this is what happens. We spend a lot of time thinking about the next word we want to say, and that does affect the flow or the rhythm, right? With practice, of course, it would improve. But this man strikes me as more of a beginner level versus the other two writing responses we saw. I will quickly show you some sentence structures. Remember, this is part of the listenability factor in your speaking assessment. I've underlined for you a couple of simple sentences that this man is creating correctly from a grammar standpoint. But I'm sure you noticed that there are quite a few errors as well. Almost every sentence indeed does have some sort of a grammatical mistake within it. So right up at top here, I heard that you get offer. We know that's a verb tense mistake. We might have said, I heard that you were offered a job or that you received an offer from, and so on, right? So I think if you just glance at these mistakes I've underlined for you, we pretty much always know what the general idea is. But you can also see that these expressions are either not grammatically correct or they're just not using a natural expression. So it's just another marker of a more beginner level. And with practice, these are exactly the skills that we would improve upon. So listenability definitely has quite a few factors we'd want to improve. Moving on to content, I love the fact, first off, that he doesn't name his friend up top, but he does congratulate his friend for getting this job. So I think that's a wonderful way to start. Really, the only piece of advice, though, he gives his friend is to do the research. Do the research to see what your new job would entail. And then those 5 blue ideas I've underlined for you, they're, I guess, meant to be supporting details. But as you can see, none of these details are co-relating. They're not talking about the same idea. It's almost like a to-do list of general topics that our speaker wants his friend to look into. So first he says, find out about the city, check out the weather, determine which clothes you'll need, learn how to open a bank account, figure out if you've got friends there. So you can see that coherence is weak. We haven't developed or connected any of these ideas. We're just throwing any old idea that comes to mind. So again, sure, we probably would look into these things if we were going to be moving far away, but The ideas need to be a little bit more smoothly connected and developed, of course, to strengthen the score. That being said, vocabulary is actually not half bad. As you can see, we have lots of examples of words that have been used quite well. Congratulations is obvious, right? It's a great way to start. Words like graduation, overseas, based on my experience, and so on. Wide world. I love that. So yeah, we have definitely some vocab work emerging. But there are also quite a few words that are fairly common or repetitive. So words like good, that's a very simple word. Rather than say it's a good opportunity, we might just say, oh, it's a fantastic opportunity. Find ways to elevate the interest. Notice this man uses that expression, offer from overseas. He repeats that a couple of times. And likewise with you need to know, you need to do this. So we're repeating the structures rather than showing a good range. So we try to show a range when we can. And as far as task fulfillment goes, again, tone is wonderful. Congratulating your friend is a great way to show support. I think that's great. He did speak for 90 seconds, and I know that there were lots of interruptions, but speaking for 90 seconds is what he was asked to do, and he did it. So that would actually be a strength under task fulfillment as well. So he, in a very general way, understood the test instructions and did provide it, ideas that were relevant, even though they weren't overly developed. Okay, so once again, let me get your new poll here on screen. There we have it. So which score do you believe this man earned? Level 5, level 8, level 9, level 12. You've already seen a 9 and a 12, if that helps. So think about the skills demonstrated by Larry, then Peter, and then look at this man's response here. And that might help you put it all into place. Okay, looking good here. Interesting again. We have a dead tie again for level 5 and level 9. All right, so we better figure out which one it is because there's a huge difference in ability level. Level 5 is beginner, level 9 is intermediate. So obviously those would be very far apart. And looks like the winner in this poll is level 8. And I think this is the first time that our majority is not correct. I'm going to show you what the actual score of this response is. Yep, this is a level 5. So this would be considered more of I would say a high beginner. So a level 5 speaker would have the foundational skills. I mean, his ideas did make sense. And even with all of the little grammar mistakes, we could still understand what he was talking about. We could catch the gist. So what we do is take those foundational skills and begin to develop, right, more grammatically correct sentences, more developed details, less interruptions as we talk, and so on. But yeah, this is one way to achieve a level 5 anyway. We have one more response to do. Let's get into it quickly and then we'll log out. This is your speaking task 3, describing a scene. And for this time, I think before I show you the transcript, I will play the audio as we're looking at the picture because this woman is going to be describing some things that are happening in this picture. And we want to make sure she's giving an accurate and interesting description as she goes. So I'll play it for you now. And as I say, we'll do a quick talk about her skills and then we're done for the day.
The picture that I am looking at is very colorful. There is a lot going on. There is an older couple holding hands and looking at each other. You can see the blue sky. You can also see a father with his daughter. The daughter is in a blue dress and she's pointing at a puppy who is chasing some kind of food. There is this older lady that is trying to buy food. So she's reaching into her pocket to get her wallet for some money. And she's standing in front of a curry bowl. There is also a smoothie shop. And these two ladies seem to be very happy serving this little boy that seems so excited. There is this mother and son. And they're just walking. She's wearing this pink t-shirt and shorts.
Okay, she got cut off at the end as well, but she'd given more than enough detail, so that would not be a factor in the score. I thought I'd point that out first. So really quickly, I'm just going to suggest her pronunciation's fine. I hope you agree. There was no trouble understanding the words as she spoke, and that's great. There were definitely a few of these interjections and pauses, but I think they were fairly natural. I mean, most of us would say or once in a while as we're making an answer up. They didn't happen so frequently like what we heard from the man earlier. So I wouldn't say they were distracting. I wouldn't count interjections or pausing as a major weakness under listenability here. Intonation was used well too. The voice sort of rose and fell where it needed to engage us as listeners and organize the response. And her speed and volume were fine too. So from a speech perspective, there's not a lot to point out that needs to be corrected. There are just a couple of things that I would work on. If I was to sit with the student, I would point out that even though grammatically the sentences are fine, we do not have all of those grammar mistakes that we saw in the man's response just earlier. But if you look at these sentence structures, they're all fairly simple and quite repetitive. Pretty much every time she starts a new idea in the scene, she begins with there is. And then when she goes to add a detail, almost always she uses and. So again, sure, we understand the ideas. There are no grammar mistakes, and that's wonderful. But you can see yourselves how repetitive and also how simple these structures are. So if we could make a better variety as well as include higher level joining words and structure our sentences differently, then that would be one way to strengthen the listenability score as well. As far as content goes, I mean, she gives a very adequate description. If you look at those burgundy words for you, I think there are about 5 people or parts of the scene. She describes the couple, the daughter, the puppy, the older lady, and then another woman she mentions at the end. So I would argue in your speaking task 3, describing 3 to 5 parts of the scene would probably be about average for a 60-second response. I think this is a good example to gauge from in that regard. The vocab that she's used there in green is accurate and the verb tense is correct. She's using what's called that present continuous verb tense. The couple is holding hands. So this is what's happening right now, all of these ing verb tenses and so on. So yeah, they're accurate, they're descriptive to a point. Like sure, the couple is holding hands, they're looking at each other. The daughter is in a blue dress, she's pointing at a puppy. But not every single description in her response is as interesting as perhaps it could be. So I'll point out a few that we definitely, with time and effort, could make a little bit more interesting. Even in her opening, all she says about the picture is that it's very colorful and there's a lot going on. Well, that doesn't tell us much. You know, imagine you're on the phone and this woman is describing the picture to you. You would not be able to imagine in your mind what she's looking at, and that's a problem. So instead, could we say something like, I'm looking at a picture of many community members enjoying food at a festival in their neighborhood. Something like that would set the scene, and at least you could imagine that, and then we could develop the ideas from there. I think most of the details in the middle of a response had a little bit more descriptive quality to them, but at the very end, we lose that description. The 2 ladies she talks about, all she says about them is that they seem to be happy. And the boy just seems so excited. And mother and son, they're just walking. So even though those ideas, I would say, are accurate, sure, they're just not that descriptive or interesting. You know, we'd want to use language and more descriptive vocabulary too. That would really elevate the quality of the detail there. As far as task fulfillment goes, as I said, she did not provide an overview of the scene. So it would have been nice to know first that many people were eating food at a festival. That would have been helpful. But she did speak for the 60 seconds and she did certainly understand the task and gave us many accurate descriptions. So all of that's been done quite well from your task fulfillment standpoint. So this is the very last poll that I'm going to launch as we are just finishing up with the webinar today. So of all 4 levels, which one do you believe this woman scored? Is this a level 5, a level 8, a level 9, or a level 12? Today, so far, you've already seen a 5, a 9, and a 12. So think of it that way. All right. Here's what you said. So we've got the majority, 56% of you suggesting level 8, followed by level 9 at 38%. So you're sort of in the right area. Yep, this is intermediate level. So we're in the middle. It's either a level 8 or a level 9. And I'll show you exactly which score it is now. This woman earned a level 8. So level 8 is good proficiency. It means that, once again, you've understood the task, you've answered it with sufficient detail that, it's interesting to a point, but what it's lacking to get to the level 9 is it doesn't have all of that complexity that we like to see. Perhaps the vocab's a bit more simplistic, sentence structures are more simple than complex, and so on, right? Level 9 today, if you can remember back to the first email we looked at with Larry, even though there were no paragraphs there, after today's session, when you get your study pack, have a look at Larry's response with the details and vocab, and then have a look at this woman's transcript we provided, and you'll see immediately what I'm talking about. They're both good responses. We understand the ideas, but that level 9 email definitely has a lot more descriptive energy behind it than what we see here in the level 8. Anyway, we're finished up with the content. I'm going to quickly mention our test preparation materials. So if you have any last minute questions about CELPIP, now would be a good time to place those in the chat box. I will start off by mentioning, if you are a newcomer to Canada, the CELPIP team has a partnership with the National Bank of Canada. So if you are looking to open a bank account, if you follow the links on our website and open an account with the National Bank, they will give you a $300 cashback option. And that would cover the cost of your CELPIP test if you choose to place the money towards it. So it could be a good deal if it applies to you. You, as you know, can take CELPIP for your immigration and work permits both. So postgraduate work permit applications in Canada are supported by the CELPIP test. We do have 9 free webinars on Zoom, as I mentioned earlier today. They're all 2 hours long. They're free to access, but you simply would want to register on the website so we can send you the Zoom link exactly the same way you attended today's session. So you see a list of all webinars here. Today's session was more of an introduction, but we do have individual webinars for reading, listening, writing, and speaking. As a matter of fact, the writing sessions, we've got 2 different sessions, one that targets level 5, one that looks at levels 9 to 12. And as far as the speaking aspects go, we actually have 4 webinars now. So you'll be able to look just at level 5 if you take the Target 5 webinar, or we've got 3 separate webinars that walk you through that level 9 to 12. So pick your poison, as we say, pick the one that you want to register for, or register for all of them. But by the time you're done all 9 free webinars, you'll have a very good understanding of what the test is all about. We do have a YouTube channel as well called CELPIP Official, and I strongly recommend that you take advantage of all of the free instructional episodes that are on YouTube. This is also, by the way, where we keep the recorded webinars that we do. So if you don't want to wait for us to email you with your study pack links, make your way to YouTube and find the playlist yourself. It's really easy. It's the same recording. We also have our CELPIP Live series that's posted there too. And we also have a study series of webinars there. So lots and lots of free instruction available. For those of you wondering about different levels of performance in writing and speaking on CELPIP, what I'd want you to do is go to the CELPIP homepage. Right up top, find the Prepare for CELPIP section. And if you click on the score comparison chart, you'll be able to either read through written samples like we did today, or listen to the recorded speaking answers like we did today. So you navigate between speaking and writing, up to you, whichever one you're studying today. You'll also notice some other menu options here. So we have sample responses. That's where you actually review the work, and an analysis button there too. So you get to decide what level you want to study. All 12 levels are there. So pick the one you're interested in earning. Maybe it's a level 10, for example. Okay, so if you're on the sample response tab in the middle, you'll be able to read through the test instructions or test question. You'll be able to actually review the student answers, very much like we did today. And then once you're familiar with the student responses, you can then click response analysis to see what the strengths and weaknesses are across those categories that we were talking about. So it's just a really great way to more fully understand the scoring procedures, and just to see other examples of which, whatever level you're wanting, I assume is the level that you would want to study first. Okay, we do have an official CELPIP podcast, by the way. That's the name of the podcast, Official CELPIP Podcast. We do have all past episodes posted to the blog section of the CELPIP website, or you can download them from Spotify or Apple or wherever else you listen to podcasts. They're downloadable from there. So check those out. I have mentioned the 2 free practice tests a few times now, so you'll find those right on the website as well. So please take advantage. And one other little freebie I will mention is that when you register for your official CELPIP test, If you're registering for your general test, you'll be given 5 hours of free access to an online course called the Accelerate. And this course has more than 30 instructional videos. It has real CELPIP test questions and quizzes and so on. So instead of just buying the course outright, you'll have a bit of time to try it for free. And if you really do like it, of course, you could make the purchase from the online bookstore. If you are applying for the general LS test for CELPIP, you'd be given 2.5 hours of free access. And again, you only get access when you register for your official test. Bear that in mind. And once you've exhausted the free prep, we do have that online bookstore where we sell additional practice tests. There are currently 13 sets of tests. Each set contains 2 tests. So that would be a total of 26 CELPIP tests available for purchase. There's that Accelerate course that I was talking about as well. You can purchase that. We have a practice and analysis series, which is similar to what we did today, where you're looking at actual student responses in speaking and writing, and you're getting a good analysis and discussion of strengths and weaknesses. There are ebooks you might purchase, like a study guide. There's a common CELPIP error book. There's a focus textbook series. There's also a book. You can buy the vocabulary skills book as an online ebook, or you might find print copies remaining if you browse at the Chapters bookstore. That is a Canadian bookstore chain, by the way. Some of you, if you've got a little bit more money to spend, and if you were interested in actually studying in a class with one of our prep providers, feel free to browse the website to see where the nearest network member is to you. Different institutions around the world, not just in Canada, but internationally too, they have certified their own instructors to teach for the CELPIP test. So we'll call them CELPIP experts. And what they'll do is offer a curriculum that takes you through the listening, reading, writing, speaking sections. Some of these classes would be online, some might be in person. It all depends on the actual institution where you would be registering. So each institution sets its own schedules and own prices. So just take a little look at the website if it appeals to you. Some of us like to study in smaller groups. And I'll finish off by mentioning today that if you did want to study at a Canadian university or college in the future, chances are you would need an academic language proficiency score to meet their entrance requirements. So you can take a test called the CAEL. CAEL stands for Canadian Academic English Language Test. It is administered by Prometric, which is the same company that delivers the CELPIP test to you. So if you're interested in finding more about the CAEL, you can go to the celpip.ca website, read up more about there. We do offer live webinars as well on Zoom. You can find a list of test centers on the website too. Note as well, if you lived in one of these 13 countries listed on screen, you could take the test from your home computer. So that's an option to you. And that is it for us. I will leave you with this little list of contact information. I guess most notable up top, you can see the customer service email, info@celpip.ca. And then all 4 of these social media channels do have free instructional material of some kind. CELPIP Live, we still go live every second Thursday, by the way, on YouTube, 9:30 in the morning, Pacific time. And on Instagram as well, we go live fairly often. Schedules are not routine, as we do partner up with a variety of different guests and whatnot. But I suppose if you were subscribed to the channel, you would always know when the next live was happening. So thank you so much for attending today. I hope you leave here today with a lot more knowledge about what this CELPIP test is all about, and you're thinking about the skills we discussed in speaking and writing in particular. So thanks so much, and hopefully we'll see you back for the next live session. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.